Welcome, foolish mortals, to Halloween Treats, presented by the Look Back Machine. For the entire month of October, we bring you 31 episodes on 31 flicks. So sit back and relax on your broomstick. We have blood-curdling boogeyman and sadistic serial killers. From castles to were-rabbits to spine-chilling spine-tinglers. Oh, but that's not all. It's only a bit. There's also Dahmer, Dracula, and Wallace and Gromit. So turn down the lights and turn up the sound. And ready your heart, for it's about to pound. Because there's Halloween film history abound. Happy Halloween from the Look Back Machine.
Last year, with Greg Gonzalez of LA Meekly, we celebrated the career of Vincent Price. And since you can't celebrate Halloween without Vincent Price, here we are again with a new entry into our Vincent Price saga, Dead Heat. Dead Heat stars Treat Williams as a cop who has been resurrected for 24 hours to solve his own murder, with his plucky partner played by Joe Piscopo. Price plays Arthur P. Loudermilk, the crazed scientist trying to capitalize on his resurrection machine. Price plays it with his usual gusto, despite his elderly look in this entertaining addition to his film catalog. The film was disparaged then, but has gone on to become a cult classic. This is the story of Dead Heat. Director Mark Goldblatt.
Through connections with my agents, I met Michael Meltzer and David Halpern, the producers of Dead Heat, who were preparing the picture. We're trying to decide on a director to hire, and we got along pretty well. And I read the script, and I was really taken by it. The script for Dead Heat was based on the movie DOA, which starred Edmund O'Brien as a guy who gets poisoned. He has radium poisoning, and he's going to die within a day or two. And he has like 24 hours to discover who killed him. So it's a real noir film, and kind of a unique film in the noir canon. And the script was written by Terry Black, who was a young writer at the time, who was, interestingly enough, was the brother to Shane Black, is the brother to Shane Black.
Writer Terry Black.
Well, I knew I wanted to write a detective story because they fascinate me, and when I have an original gimmick, like Columbo has his cigar, Kojak had his lollipop, and I thought, well, my singular fascination is death. What happens if the hero's dead, but it doesn't stop him from conducting an investigation? And be surprised how the scenes wrote themselves. What I do when I set out to write a script, I think, okay, what's every possible scene that might happen given the premise, in this case, dead detective, and the ideas came. There were so many. The problem was figuring out which ones to use and which not to, how to arrange them in a logical sequence, how to fit that 3-act structure, but there was no shortage of material. The script practically wrote itself. I have a regular daytime job, and I had a 2-week shutdown over Christmas time. And I thought, during these 2 weeks, I'm not employed by anyone else. I'm a self-employed writer, and I'm not going back to work until I've got a script. By the time I went back to work, I had one. No, I was very much aware of DOA. That movie fascinates me. Functioning of the story, the way the plot works, I defy anyone to explain it clearly. But what you get from that is, here's a guy who's dead, he's got nothing to lose, and his last remaining hours he spends on the problem of his own murder. And talk about a riveting story. You can't look away from that movie. It's amazing. Go see it. See it today.
Make a long story short, I got the opportunity to direct Dead Heat. It was my first full-motion picture directing. Now, to prepare for it, prior to making Dead Heat, I worked with Paul Verhoeven and directed some second unit for RoboCop. And working with Paul, I got a good crash course in making a low-budget picture. and planning the shots and doing shot lists and knowing what I needed to get and what I could afford not to get. So Dead Heat was a go. Actually, we made it through several regimes. After it was meant to be a go project, there was a big shakeup in the administration of New World Pictures, who was making the movie. And we started with a whole new slate of executives who we had to convince to keep our movie on their list of films to be made. So, a lot of times when a new ownership comes into a studio, they want to get rid of all the projects that the previous regime had set up. But in this case, they actually went for it. Now, the other thing was there was some trepidation on the part of the studio as to giving a picture to a first-time director. I was able to get Joe Dante, who was one of my mentors. So Joe Dante was basically there to be a creative consultant. If, God forbid, I was to screw up and the film was in trouble, he would step in and help me out. It never came to that. Nonetheless, I really doubt I would have been able to get that picture done without having Joe's collaboration.
Friends and associates, how nice to see you again.
I saw you buried, Arthur. Damn it, I saw you buried.
Oh, I'm afraid you have been misled, Walter. The man in my grave is a volunteer, personally selected by Dr. McNabb. As you will see, ladies and gentlemen, the demonstration that you are about to witness makes burial somewhat unnecessary.
Well, I think it was actually Joe Dante who got the idea. And I thought, yes, of course. I mean, it never occurred to me that we could actually get Vincent Price. But we made a deal, and we got him for like 3 days or something. It was at the tail end of his career. He liked the script and thought it would be fun to do. And so he said, sure, I'll do it. And the rest is Dead Heat history.
His first words when we met, and I quote, "Great script." He was a gentleman. He had real class. Apparently confessed he was embarrassed by some of his older movies. Perhaps not as classy as he was, but he was a great performer. He was such a legend. On the final day of his filming, it was a double line forming to get his picture and his autograph. Everybody liked him. You couldn't not like him. He's a legend.
It was a dream come true. He was very, very sweet person and very committed. He came in. He would drive himself to the set. I've often remarked about how he came in he was wearing a pair of red sneakers and a smile on his face. Very inclusive, very open. When we were taking fittings for some of the visual effects makeups, we took him down to Steve Johnson's studio, and he had to do a face cast. And the visual effects crew was basically huddled all around him just to be in his presence because, these are mostly fans, horror fans, and when they weren't making these pictures, they were watching the pictures. So they were all fans of Vincent Price, and it was like an army of visual effects artists paying homage to Vincent Price. We shot one scene in a studio at the Culver Studios in Culver City in L.A. He was telling me that he had shot in that studio. He had done a film in the 40s called His Kind of Woman, directed by John Farrow, in which Vincent played a ham actor who helps out Robert Mitchum, who's up against a mobster. And Vincent's great in this movie because it's an over-the-top performance, just classic Vincent Price. And he was regaling me with stories about his working on that film and other films. He was always there for us. One time we needed him back for like half a night or something. We needed to get more footage for him for the climax. And he came and did it and didn't charge us any money for it because he knew that we were up against it in terms of budget. He was committed to the movie. I mean, it's a highlight of my creative lifetime, is working with him.
Are you prepared to become a memorial plaque on the cornerstone of a library building? Isn't it frustrating? All of that money, all of that raw power just within your grasp. And then it's all gone. Poof. Suddenly, You're 6 foot under, and a mob of money-grubbing nobodies are devouring all that is yours, like rodents after a lump of cheese. Isn't it sad? Everybody dies, rich and poor. Death doesn't discriminate. At least not until now.
This is ridiculous.
Well, let's face it. Poor people are supposed to die, but the same rule doesn't apply to us. We're rich. God wants us to live forever. And even if he doesn't, we can always buy him off. It'll cost all of you half of your fortune. But you have forever to make it back. Life without end. Your personal savings compounded daily for 1,000,000 glorious years.
What's your gimmick, Arthur?
No gimmick. Eternal life.
Bullshit.
Well, I know that it's absurd, impossible, but aside from the proof of my being here, I've planned for you a very graphic little demonstration.
Well, horror pictures often get into that gray area where what's too intense for one audience is not enough for the other audience. There was definitely an ideology on the part of New World to try to make a picture that would appeal to a broader audience. When you say that, that's very tricky, because sometimes that means taking your target audience and watering down the movie that you're delivering to them. I saw Dead Heat as an over-the-top, grand guignol horror comedy. And so there was a balance. I was basically pushing the envelope on how far we could go. New World was resistant to taking it that far, for sure. But the bottom line was, when it came time to show it to the MPAA, we kept getting an NC-17 every time. In those days, they would slap you with an NC-17 just to make you cut stuff down. And I had to submit Dead Heat 9 times to the MPAA in order to get an R rating. And as you look at it now, and it's pretty tame. Really, the things that we had to cut out, they were the intensity of things.
My biggest regret is a scene at the end where Treatwings is going into the resurrection lab, and he gets shot from behind, and turns around and shoots the other guy. And the other guy's also a zombie, so neither one of them can die just from getting shot. And they empty their guns into each other. And that was supposed to go for an entire minute, just blasting each other. And the scene is there, but for my money, it doesn't go on as long, and it's not as absurd as it might have been.
That was the joke. The joke was they can't kill each other. So I had to trim that down. So it's actually not quite as funny, but it suited the MPAA, and that's what happened. I had no choice. I was told to make these cuts, or we will make them for you. I made the cuts.
I do think if I had a complaint that the studio didn't market the movie properly, they didn't want it to be billed as a zombie film, so don't use the word zombie in the advertising. And I thought that was the wrong approach. I thought that should have been front and center. He's a detective and he's dead. That should be on the one sheet. And when the movie wasn't a big financial success, I had to wonder if, had they marketed it better, might it have done better in the box office. There are people who told me I saw that, I didn't know what it was, I didn't see it, but if I'd known it was a zombie film, I might have. That haunts me to this day.
One of the executives told me when they put together a trailer for the movie that they showed at sales conventions and so forth, he said they're loving the trailer. They think that the exhibitors think that this could be the next Beverly Hills Cop. And I realized that they were selling it as a cop movie and downplaying the horror. Now, that said, and the fact that they didn't spend a lot of money promoting the picture to begin with, resulted in very poor box office. Because the movie didn't have any traction on its own. You had to go out there and create interest in it by showing what it is and hopefully getting people excited. But if you try to sell it like a Lethal Weapon or any buddy cop movie, where it's two guys holding a gun in a frame, that makes it very generic seeming and doesn't address the special nature of the film. I mean, Dead Heat, is pretty unique. There's not a lot of films like it in terms of tone, and it's a tricky tone. I understand that because a lot of people discovered Dead Heat on video. And it didn't do so well at the theaters, but why should it have? When there were no ads visible to sell them what the movie was. Why would somebody go to see this movie with Treat Williams and Joe Piscopo, two cops, which looks like any number of other two-cop movies? If they don't even know there's monsters in it, you're not going to go see it if you're a monster fan. So, but people caught on because videotapes were easy to get, and people would talk about it, and more people would go out and see it and rent it, and it became kind of a cult item. I mean, I have to admit that even as I was making it, I kept thinking, this has all the earmarks of a cult movie. Well, I didn't realize it would take, 10 years, 15 years after the fact when the cult would emerge.
It's become a much bigger cult classic than I ever expected, especially the butcher shop scene. That was probably my favorite. All the meat in the butcher shop comes to life and attacks them. This was done before they had CGI. So everything you were seeing was done with puppets. And this is work of Patrick Reed Johnson, the visual effects coordinator. And he is an out-and-out genius. I think they blew half the budget on that butcher shop and all the meat come to life. And that great steer without a head that emerges from the freezer and attacks them, which is actually some guy inside on stilts. That is probably the high point of the movie. He did an exceptional job. And if I had to guess, that's why the film has enduring popularity, because that scene so impresses people. I haven't seen this before.
Thanks for listening to Halloween Treats, presented by the Lookback Machine. Stay tuned for the entire month of October for an episode every single day till November.
Yes, I actually wrote Dead Heat 2. Oh, it had a slogan for it, too. It was Dead Heat 2. This time, they're even more dead. And had the movie been a success, that might have seen daylight, but sadly, it didn't make enough money. But I've kept that script. I've been tinkering with it over the years. There is a possibility that they might revisit it now because of its cult status. Currently, the film is owned by some guy who has a 300-film library, and he doesn't want to do anything. And he's trying to sell that library, lock, stock, and barrel. And whoever buys it will probably be looking for how to monetize those films. And the first thing we'll do is approach him and say, well, how about a sequel to Dead Heat? And see if we can put a deal together. That might happen, but right now it's all speculation. So I wish I could tell you, yes, they're making Dead Heat 2. All I can tell you is, well, they might. Stay tuned for details.